team barber and chaplain for the Milwaukee Bucks. I like to say this: Ken is a world-class communicator, and his presence is felt in every single room that he's in.
You cannot continue to greet people after every service. And I told them, if I cannot love people in between speaking, then I don't want to speak. Because loving people is where I actually feel the presence of God the most. I've always been transparent, real, and unedited with you. And I said it would be a sin for me to stop.
Welcome to the Backstage with Mike O'Connell. Today's guest, Ken Lock, is a good friend. He's a father, the team barber and chaplain for the Milwaukee Bucks, and the lead pastor of Evolve Church, one of America's fastest growing churches. I like to say this: Ken is a world-class communicator, and his presence is felt in every single room that he's in. But one of my favorite things about Ken, and the thing that I want to celebrate, is his vulnerability and humility, which makes him a magnet in every room that he walks into. It's my honor and privilege to welcome to the Backstage Ken Lock. Bro, thank you so much for being on today's show.
Man, OC, I'm just glad you invited me, man. Seriously, I think I would start off this by just saying I appreciate how intentional you are with relationships, man. If there's nothing else I can remember you for from the first time we connected, bro, you've always been extremely intentional, man. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, you're a good friend, man, and it's been so cool. We've just had the opportunity to link up on a couple different events, and be in the same room in some really cool moments. And obviously, they say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yes.
Right. The atmosphere you permit decides the product you produce. And I know I'm better because you're in my life, and I know there's so many people that are being touched by your life, and I'm excited to dive into your story a little bit. And I think. I know this. I kind of want to go back in your life because I know this. You have 10 sisters and one brother. My goodness. Hello, somebody. Your parents didn't miss be fruitful and multiply.
It's their favorite scripture. We say all the
time. Come on, man. Yeah. But I would love for you to help our listeners understand a little bit more about your upbringing, but in particular, how that upbringing, how being a part of a big family contributed to some of the foundational principles that you still carry with you today.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, a couple of things, man. Having 10 sisters, number one, will teach you all you need to know on how to allow women to have their space and not argue. And my sister, I would try to argue with one sister and all 10 would jump in. And I learned quickly that women stick together. So you are not going to win this if you try to fight against one. But no, being raised with 10 sisters, I am child number 7. I used to always say lucky number 7 growing up. So I have 6 older sisters, 4 younger sisters, and 1 younger brother. And so, man, I slept on the floor until I was a teenager. It was like 14 of us in a 2-bedroom household. So I wasn't raised spoiled at all. I mean, we had very limited means, but we had so much love in our family. It's one of those things where, I mean, when you look back, you think I think it was kind of tough growing up, all things considered. But while I was living it, it didn't feel that tough. I mean, you never had your own room ever at any time. You always shared your room, but you learn how to share. You learn how to think about others when you're doing something. You learn how to put family first. You learn that every decision you make affects somebody else, right? And those are the life lessons that you learn at a young age, and then you carry them with you for forever because you learn so much in those early developmental years. Explicitly between 7 to 11, and then the preteen 11 to 16. You just develop and you grow a lot of qualities that you're going to keep for the rest of your life. And so I got a loud voice. I don't mind being in a crowded room because I grew up in a crowded house. And being the middle child, you're not the oldest or the youngest, so you kind of just get lost in there. So you got to figure out how to make your staple, and hey, you got to be seen. And the only way to be seen is you got to find a way to stand out. So I learned how to stand out of a crowd, even when I was a kid.
Yeah, but hey, there's no doubt, man. Every room you walk into, it's so evident, man, just the charisma and the magnetic personality that God has given you. But I like to say this: if serving is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. It's like this principle that of servant leadership. And I think about how your upbringing helped you in that regard, even with this kind of charismatic, magnetic personality.
Yes, sir.
You see how even in your journey, man, of impact, that's carried with you. And I think I just want you to kind of fast forward to, I know that you always talk about how at 19 years old, you're listening to Les Brown and John Maxwell, and you've always had this desire to communicate and lead.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting about your story is, you grew up a pastor's kid,
Yeah.
and you served alongside your parents for almost 10 years. Is that right?
Yeah. 10 years with my dad. Absolutely. And
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that season, man, because I think, especially in this world, and our good friend Jordan Montgomery says this. He says, we've got a generation that at times can be overexposed and underdeveloped.
oh my goodness.
Because of the nature of going viral, and we all now have the ability to build our own platforms. And here's the thing, let's not throw shade on that. Like, we
Yeah.
want to throw gas on your dreams and your aspirations and your
Yeah.
desires.
Yeah.
However, oftentimes God wants to do something in us before he does something through us. So can you just talk about that season of serving your father faithfully and what you learned
Yeah,
in some
absolutely.
of the
I
principles?
mean, I love that you start off with the quote, if serving is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. Because truly, servant leadership has to not be a principle you believe in. It has to be a core belief that you live by. And that's what it is for me. It's just a core belief that I live by, that no matter what room I go in, I want to serve, whether it be serving the joy of the Lord, whether it be serving just in my vulnerability and allowing people in the room to say, hey, this isn't a room where you have to put on for me. I take so much joy in giving people safe spaces to just be themselves. I mean, being a pastor's kid, I saw a leader who served week in and week out, and nobody just saw the weight that he carried privately. And I also saw that he just really didn't have safe spaces to be honest, to be open. If you're having a crappy week, you're having a crappy week. If you lost your loved one, you're battling the same grief as somebody else. Just because you're a pastor doesn't mean you don't grieve and you don't weep and you don't have to pray your way through difficult seasons. And so seeing that made me want to serve, seeing true leadership and my dad being a man of integrity, and seeing him love my mom for almost 40 years now in marriage, and just having integrity the entire time, it made me want to serve. And so I just dug in. I found out listening to the Les Browns and the John Maxwells and those guys, and I'm 19, and they're talking about, this is the price you have to pay. You have to serve. And, and I'm like, all right, come on, like, let's go. And
come on, let's get it.
I'm reading books like Bringing Out the Best in People and The Magic of Thinking Big, or The Choice by Agnandino. And I'm 19, but I'm just being engulfed in leadership and putting others first. And so I served in my dad's church, and that was my first way to really grow in those skills and aptitudes, if you would. So, I mean, I was the guy who removed the snow. So that was my first ministry role. Was not even in the building. It was, can you go outside and shovel so that people could have a clean walkway when they're coming inside the building?
Come on, man.
And then my second role was to mop the floors, because we had hardwood floors at that time, and they would always get dusty in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because of the snow and the salt. And then I got the infamous bathroom job. Can you clean the toilets? Because everybody wants to sit on the clean toilet, right? But nobody ever helps to keep the toilet clean, but they all want to sit on the clean one. So
right. Come on.
I cleaned the bathrooms in the church for a while, and that was humbling in and of itself. It's like impossible to keep bathrooms clean. I don't know what it is. It's like, that's the one place people want to make dirty. And so I cleaned bathrooms, and then it kind of grew from there. I started serving in our kids ministry and just spending time with the kids, depositing into the youth. And then my dad kind of saw my heart and my aptitude for leadership, and he had me speaking to the young men at that time, so our young teens ministry. And he would see me speak, and then he was like, you know what? I want to try you on the main stage. So we had like a youth explosion. He was like, I want you to go. And this is my first time. And this was one of those moments where serving came back to bless me, because
wow.
I just sent a text message to people like, hey, I'm going to be giving my first message. Man, I had gone through some ministerial training and all of that. I'm like, man, I'm excited. And in my first time I spoke at my dad's church, man, it was standing room only. People came from all over the city who had people I had served, whether they had been in school or on a sports team, or no matter where I was, my character and my integrity went before me. And so it was time to speak. I mean, literally, there was standing room only. People were on the walls, man. And I I was nervous, but I shared my first message, man, and I believe that was the beginning of my public speaking, but it was not the beginning of my character, my integrity, and my servanthood, showing me that when you put those first, they will always precede you and like pave the way for the things that God really has in store for you. So, servant leadership to me it really is a part of my core, and still to this day, pastor at church. And I think that if anything, if you were to say anybody in the church, what would you notice Pastor Ken for? It would always be, man, this guy's serving somebody somewhere, because it really does bring me to life. It makes me feel good every time.
It's so cool to see that you've carried those early seasons in ministry with you today, as the platform has gotten bigger, as the crowds have gotten bigger.
Yeah,
And it's so evident, in the fruit, right? And
absolutely.
just, one of the things that I love about you when you talk about just the art of communication is you talk about how so many communicators are serving the crowd rather than the people that are in the crowd. And you
Man.
talk about this idea of having compassion. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always challenged and checked myself with this, because we've done prison ministry, we've done street ministry, we've spoken in church. Our church is we see quite a few people. We see about 4,400 people on the weekend, and I think that there's this draw towards the stage and draw towards the crowd. And I've learned that a lot of us, as communicators, and I check my own self with this, I want to make sure that I'm not waking up more and being more excited because there's a larger crowd, right? Like if
Mm.
the number is bigger, like, oh man, I spoke in front of 5,000, spoke in front of 10,000. And it's cool, but it doesn't really matter if you don't care about the individuals that you're actually speaking to. And that's what it is for me. I love people and not crowds. So after every sermon, I'm in a crowd, I'm hugging the kids, I'm loving on families, I'm praying for newborns. And this is after every service, and my team is always like, "Yo, we had 3 services now. We have to go to 4 services. Like, you have to stop going in the hallway. Like, you cannot continue to greet people after every service." And I told them, if I cannot love people in between speaking, then I don't want to speak, because
Come
loving
on, man.
people is where I actually uh, feel the presence of God the most. It's when I love people as I love myself. It's when I love God by loving His people, and getting a chance to love on people in tough moments, in difficult moments, in moments where they feel like, hey, I just need a hug from my pastor. I just need my pastor to say, hey, God's got you. It's okay. Just keep going, keep trusting. And that stuff for me is the compassion for the lives of the people that we speak to. It really is more than just saying there's a number, how many? Oh, 4,300 or 40. It isn't that for me. It genuinely is how many people's lives were changed, and how many of those lives was I able to personally impact? How many could I pray for? How many could I shake a hand, change a life? How many could I hug on and just share the love of Jesus? Because for me, I think if we're not sharing His love, we should question everything else that we're sharing.
Yeah, I think I want to point this out for all of our listeners right now. What you're dropping right now is absolute gold. And, you and I had an opportunity to go be at an event with John Maxwell, one of the world's best communicators, best
Absolutely.
leaders. And what you're talking about is what he's still doing at 77 years old. I mean, the
Yes.
guy is still loving on the people that he's speaking to. And I think about this. Here's the principle for our listeners today, because we're speaking to leaders, and it doesn't matter how big of a team you're leading or how big of a stage you have or how many people you're impacting. Here's what I do know. Your words mean so much more to the person that you're willing to get off the stage and have a conversation
Oh,
with.
come on. That
And
is so
so
good, man. OC.
continue to lean into that. The
Yeah.
trap that I think a lot of people fall into is what got us in this thing was our love for people. But the bigger the platform builds, the further away we move from people. So the very thing that drove us into what we're doing, we can actually
Yeah.
begin to pull away from. And then we miss out, right? We
We
miss out on
do.
what actually caused us to get in this thing. So I
Oh
love that
man.
about your heart,
Dude,
man.
I love that you pointed that out, because John Maxwell, he doesn't know me personally, but I promise you, the first time we got a chance to meet in person, John Maxwell, I walk into a room, then he gives me this big hug, right? And then it's like, as we're going, he's going around, he's talking to the room. He's walking around the room with his arm around my shoulder the entire time. So like I'm just walking with him, and he's like, Ken, and then he entertains another conversation, and he's like, hey, you Ken, right? Yeah. And then he goes. And at the end of the day, I was like, I had to think like, has he heard me speak? Or, like maybe he does secretly know me. Maybe my, one of my mentors, he doesn't know he's my mentor, but in my mind he is. Maybe one of my mentors, has heard me speak, and it blessed me so much, because
Yeah.
with the astounding amount of success that he has and the millions, literally, if not billions, you don't know, billions of people that he's reached, he still took time to wrap his arms around a complete stranger and say, "Hey, man, thanks for being here. I appreciate you."
It's so
And
good.
to me, that is the type of man I'll forever respect. That is the type of leadership I would forever emulate. Because I just think that when you're able to love that way, you really do impact lives so much more than message, more than any book of his that I read, and I have copious, more than any of his speeches that I've heard, and I've heard copious, a plethora of speeches. That one hug and that 5 minutes walking around that room is what sticks to me the most when I think of his leadership. So I'm glad you mentioned his name.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. I love that because it's almost like he lives knowing this principle that humans' greatest need is to be needed and known, or seen and known. Excuse me. Humans, one of
Yeah.
their greatest needs is to be seen and known. And I think about, for you, I think about, so we were talking about how you had the privilege of serving your father faithfully for 10 years.
Yeah.
And, now you're leading a thriving, growing church, one of the fastest growing in America.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
And
Thank you.
over 4,000 people showing up on the weekends, just
Yes, sir.
really, really beautiful work that God is doing. But there came a season in your journey where a transition needed to happen. And
Yeah.
I believe that there are some people that are listening today that they find themselves in one of those seasons. I
Yeah.
call it holy unrest. They feel like maybe God is getting ready to move them on to the
Yeah.
next thing, or maybe go after that promotion or that dream or start that business. Can you
Yeah.
just speak to those that maybe are in that season of transition? And how did you know it was time to move on? And then
Yeah.
how did you do that in a way that honored your father?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I was serving in my dad's church for 10 years. And we were serving. I was serving as first I was the next gen pastor. Then I became one of the associate pastors. So I would share, have a teaching time. I was on the teaching rotation. You have a Sunday a month. You know how that goes, right?
Oh yeah.
And so I just kept having this burden for seeing my generation come back to Jesus. It was just a heavy burden. And so I found myself, praying. We would be good, getting ready for church on Saturday. And I'm thinking about Sunday. I'm getting emotional thinking about it right now because I'm realizing I'm living inside of a prayer. But I would just get very emotional because I would go to church in my dad's church. It's a very traditional church, but oftentimes I would be the only young man there. Wouldn't see a lot of young ladies unless it was my sisters. And so I was just praying every Saturday, Lord, I just want to see young people come back to you. And one day, just through God, just dropped it on my heart. That vision is going to come to pass, but I'm going to tell you to lead it. Like, you're going to have to lead that, right? And so I went to talk to
Wow.
my dad about it. My dad, there was some struggle because family, we always want to stick together at first, right? He's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I don't know. I think you're better off here. But eventually, as we kind of wrestled through some of it, he realized, like, hey, like, what God is asking you to birth, you have to lead to birth it, because we can't change the DNA of this place in order for you to birth that. You have to, like, step away and birthed it, And so, man, we prayed together, we cried together. It was hard, right? Like, it took a while for us to really be at peace with it. I mean, even once we started and we were growing, I think a year or two in, my dad and I, he was finally like, all right, okay, I can finally fully accept it, right? Like,
Yep.
I can fully
This
accept
is
what,
real.
he was like, all right, it's clear that God's hand is on this. And he was like, man,
Wow.
son, I'm praying for you, and I wish nothing but the best. And for me, it was an honor for me to go back to my dad's church on the pastor's appreciation, and just to share, like, hey, there would be no Evolved Church. There would be no Fastest Growing if it were not for what I learned under my dad's tutelage. And not if it weren't for me mopping those floors and cleaning those toilets and learning that leadership isn't what people see. Leadership is the heart you have when you give back. And so it changed me for forever. It changed me forever. And it was difficult. Anytime you're getting ready to have a moment of transition and you're breaking the norm, you're breaking what you're used to, you get
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. And everybody who's used to you being in that position is uncomfortable now, because you leave a gap and you leave a void. And especially when you're a servant leader, I say this is how you know you're a servant leader, is that people grieve when you walk away,
Wow.
because
Come
they
on, man.
miss, like, man, we just want to miss OC. Just his heart for people, his heart to serve. Like, they just know if there was a gap there, that you would fill it. And man, servant leaders are hard to find. And so when
Totally, man.
you have to step away, people grieve it, and we grieved it together, and we prayed together, and we laughed together to this day, because we're like, man, we all see God's hand in it now. But in that time it's hard to see. So I want to encourage whoever's listening to this, if you have a moment of transition, it's okay to say, man, Ken, I don't see clearly right now. Because you don't always see it clearly. And sometimes your feelings and your emotions can make vision a bit cloudy. But just trust God, follow the process, and it always works out.
It's so good, man. It's like such a good reminder to just be willing to take one step at a time. And
Yeah.
even that one step might cost us our comfort, right? But we can have comfort or growth, but
Yes.
not both. Hello, somebody.
Come
And the
on.
discomfort isn't meant to destroy you, but to develop you. And I
Come
see like
on.
how all the favor that you're walking in, all the impact, it wouldn't have been possible without the first step. It wouldn't have been possible without your willingness to get uncomfortable. And so just super
Yeah.
proud of you for taking that step and just believing that somebody that's hearing this, that's in transition, and this is like your final confirmation. It's
Come
time to step
on.
out of the boat and move into what God has for you. Now, one
Yes,
of the
sir.
things that I want to talk about, and you knew we would get to this, but
Yeah.
on your resume, barber and chaplain for the Milwaukee Bucks. Come
Come
on.
on. Come on,
Hello.
now. Talk to me. Talk to me.
I wish you had your ring on you right now so you could
Oh, I
just
should
flash
have. I
that.
should
Yeah,
have.
you should have, bro. Man, that thing is
Yeah.
so legit. I remember when you showed me that, I was hey, you caused a brother to stumble, bro. No, I'm just playing. I'm just playing. But
Come
hey,
on, OC. I love it.
hey, but help our listeners understand, like, how in the world did this all happen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was a barber. I served in my dad's church. I was actually a volunteer staff, so I served for a time, but I wasn't getting paid, and so obviously I had to have some way of making money. And I've been cutting hair my whole life. Started cutting hair when I was young. My mom used to cut me and my little brother's hair, and man, she used to do an awful job. And she'd tell you. She said, I gave you guys the best I had, and you got to figure out the rest, right?" And so,
Yeah.
with 12 kids, you can't always afford to go to the barbershop, right? And
Mhm.
so I used to get the clippers. I started cutting my own hair, cutting my little brother's hair, would fade one another up. And then I just carried it through college. When I first went to college, I cut hair to pay my way through college. I originally went to school in my undergrad for psychology before I switched into biblical studies, but I paid my way through college. And so after college, I just continued cutting hair as like one of the ways that I made money. So I started making a lot of money, and I was thinking, like, should I work in my degree? But man, by the time I finished college, I was making six figures cutting hair. Right. And
Come
so it's
on.
like, I was making more cutting hair than what my degree would have paid me without going back to school. And so it was cutting hair. The Bucks ended up getting a hold of me because there was a guy got traded from the Phoenix Suns named Jared Dudley to the Milwaukee Bucks. And he went to another barber in the city whom I don't know. And he posted it on Twitter, man. He said, first night in Milwaukee, man, worst haircut of my life. Yeah.
You're like, I can help you. I can help you.
Yeah, like legit. Like, I'm like, man, I can help this guy. And so it's funny, a client of mine who I cut since high school ended up making it to the NBA. He played with Jared Dudley in the Phoenix Suns named Deontay Garrett. And so he knew
Oh,
him
yeah.
personally. And he texted him. He said, "Hey, I'm from Milwaukee. You got to try my guy, Ken. Like, best barber I ever had. He'll take care of you." So he did. He texted me. He said, "Hey, man, you him highly recommended. Can you come fix my hair tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah, like, I'll come through tonight. I'll fix it." And I was excited at the same time. I was thinking I was being catfished. I wasn't sure if it was actually him. And so, like, I get there and it's him. I fix his haircut. He shakes my hand. He's like, "Yo, you are my barber from now on." He goes to
Let's
practice the
go.
next day. When he gets to practice, Kendall Marshall's on the team. He sees him. OJ Mayo's on the team. Jabari Parker's on the team. They're like, "Hey, man, like, your haircut looks way fresher. Like, who did it?" He said, "Man, it's this new guy named Ken. Just met him yesterday." So they called me to the practice facility. "Hey, yo, we got 4 guys who want you to come down here and cut their hair." And
Come
so
on.
I pack up my clippers. I leave like 2 clients in the shop, right? I pack up my clippers and I go down, man. And while I'm cutting those guys, I'm cutting one after the other. Jabari walks in, OJ Mayo. Once I'm cutting OJ, Giannis Antetokounmpo walks in. Young guys, only like 3rd year in the league. And he's like, "Man, you got time for one more?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, right?" You know what I'm saying? Like,
The
but
answer is
I'm
always yes.
servant leadership, right? Absolutely. I got you, right? And so I cut his hair that day, and I've never stopped cutting his hair since. And so it was by the end of that season, the team reached out to me and they said, "Hey, man, like, you're already cutting everybody. Do you want to be the team's barber?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So this is 2015 and 16 season. So I became the team barber officially in 2016. And then it's crazy because I started church in 2018. right? And so
Wow.
I don't tell any of the guys. We planted our church in April 2018. I don't tell anybody, but somehow, some way, one of the guys got wind that I was a pastor, and so it was Malcolm Brogdon. As a matter of fact, Malcolm Brogdon was heard I was a pastor, so he's like, man, well, let us have some conversations with you about faith. He said, I've struggled in my faith, and I'm like, dude, let's do it. And so we had a 2-hour conversation around faith. And he
Wow.
comes to
Come
church the
on.
next Sunday. He's like, man, you know what? I want to come to church, Ken. I want to come. So he comes that Sunday. He loves church. Goes to practice the next morning, Monday morning. Then he tells the guys, hey, guys, you know Ken the barber? Like, yeah. Like, man, he's a pastor. And they're like, what? And they're like, no way. He's been cutting our hair for years. You wouldn't know. He's like, no, dude, I was at his church yesterday. He's a pastor. And so I get there to the locker room to cut hair. And Giannis is like, you're a pastor? Chris Middleton's like, you're a pastor? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, why didn't you say anything? I was like, well, nobody asked. You know? and I told him, I said, I would never try to like use my relationship to funnel you guys to church. Like if
Wow.
it comes up, I want to just live Jesus. And if you see my lifestyle and you respect it, then we have a conversation. But I don't want to try to manipulate a relationship. I just want to serve you guys well. And the guys, they kind of looked at me and they said, you know what? It makes sense. Like we've never heard him cuss. And he's never talking about the girls with us. And, you know, it kind of started making sense. Like, yeah, this guy, he has been living a devout life. And so they all start coming to church. I mean, Giannis, Chris,
Come on.
I mean, all of those guys, right? And so the team reaches out. They're like, hold up, man. We can't get these guys to go to chapel. How are you getting these guys to go to church? And I'm like, you know, I just serve. I don't know. I genuinely don't have a secret for you. I serve. I let my lifestyle be the example. I let my life be the beacon of light. And they was like, hey, would you mind being a team chaplain? And OC, like, let me tell you, I said yes without even knowing what it entitled. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. You know,
sign me up.
Send me with the job description and I'll make sure I can acclimate. And it's been a crazy blessing. I lead a Bible study with the guys before every single game with the home team and the away team. We come together for 15 minutes, go over the word of God. We pray for one another, encourage one another. And then they go out, they compete in the game of basketball, man. So it's been a real blessing, man, to serve in this role.
It's so good, bro. And I want to ask you while I have you, because again, you know, we're talking about on this particular podcast, I just want to see a generation of leaders, not just win in their front stage, but equally win in their backstage. And so often, you know, being a former athlete and you being around a bunch of these athletes, obviously they've got a massive platform.
Absolutely.
Man, so many people want something from them, or what they celebrate is how they perform.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that you've learned just being in that environment, like serving that group of people, and what are some lessons that you feel like have really stuck out during your time with the Bucks?
Man, absolutely. I really do. I have realized that when you're really gifted in one thing, people really do dehumanize you and just relegate you to that thing. So whether it's football, basketball, whether it's speaking, us, right? Once that becomes your thing, it's like, hey, I'm assuming that everything else in your life is perfect. I'm assuming you got it all figured out and you're good. And they so quickly, lose sight of the fact that these are very real human beings going through very real life circumstances and situations. I mean, these guys, they bleed, they cry, their families go through, and more money, more problems is a real thing, right? Because the more money you acquire, the more people look at your life and they can envision how your money can help them. And so imagine every person you meeting from this day forward, OC, they're meeting you with the agenda on the back of their mind. He can help me financially. And so you don't know if your friends are real. You don't know if connections are real. You don't know if relationships are real. And I've been through it myself, just being connected to these guys. You don't know how many people I've met. And dude, I'm thinking of my friend. Dude, we have 2 conversations, and then next thing they're like, man, I always wanted to ask you, man, can you connect me with Giannis? And I'm like, oh man, like I thought we were connecting for a real friendship. I didn't know that you were connecting because you needed me as a bridge just to get you to a guy. And these guys deal with it every single day. I mean, for every one request that Giannis accepts, he has to turn down 99 each day.
Wow.
And it's like the 99 that you turn down are like, you do nothing for people. You do nothing for the community. If you could have given back, you could have helped so many people. And he's like, I'm helping people every single day. Like every day I'm giving to a cause and to some kind of situation. And so I see these guys wear a lot of weights on their shoulder. And my job, we're walking with them, as being a chaplain, being a speaker, being a coach. It's just making sure that they remind themselves to take the weights off, that they're human, and they can live and breathe in their humanity and trust God with everything else. And that's all we really can do, right? Is do the best that we can and trust anything outside of our power is in the hands of God.
Well, I love that God's put you in their lives to show them that they are more than just the game of basketball, right? That
On.
they have more value to bring in their
Yeah,
relationships and connections. And there's
yeah,
nothing cooler, man, than turning on the TV and seeing you on the
yeah.
court, leading the guys in prayer. And
Come on.
obviously, a couple years ago, win a championship. Can you just talk a little bit about what you learned about championship culture when the Bucks, won the championship? I know you talk about championship DNA a lot, and
Oh
so what
man,
were just some of
yeah.
those lessons that you learned through that season?
Man, if I have never seen it before, I really got a chance to see there that you really need a team to win. It doesn't matter how great you are. You and I know this as speakers and as pastors as well. I mean, your message is great, but without that person working the slides,
Yeah,
without the praise team, right? Without the
come
person
on,
opening the door and greeting at the front, you're
come on.
doomed without your team. And I saw a layout in front of me how much you need a team and how each person has to not only accept their role but buy in. And
Wow.
so you had Giannis, who, and you'll see this even in business and in your church, and you'll see this in all leadership styles. You have the talent, you have the juggernaut. So in churches, it would be pastors. In business, it's usually the CEO or whatever. But in sports,
Hmm.
it's your juggernaut. It's your, this person has the talent. They're the most gifted person on the floor. I mean, just God given 7 feet, 260, just can jump like a kangaroo and run like a gazelle. Like, clear the 4-and-4 dribbles. Like, all right, this is your juggernaut. Like, you got to have a talent, right?
Yeah.
And every team has it. I mean, you got any championship team you look at, there was the juggernaut talent. There was the Jokic. There was the Michael Jordan. There was the LeBron James. There's just a juggernaut, ridiculous guy. And then secondly, you have a guy who's maybe not the juggernaut, but he's so gifted in his own way. And he's usually a talented, a skill guy. So if Jordan was the juggernaut, then Scotty is a skill guy. Chris
Yeah.
Middleton is a skill guy, right? There's a guy next to the guy who's, yeah, I'm not the juggernaut, but if you look at my stats, I'm not too far behind. Like I'm
Hmm.
good. I can support this guy. In the church, we'll call it our XP, our executive pastor. I can support this guy. I'm good. I'm talented, but I'm not trying to be what he is to the organization. I respect his role, and I understand that my role is a supportive role, right? And so I bring a different skill set, a different set of eyes, a different set of abilities to him. And then you got the third guy. This is the guy that always goes, everybody ignores him. It was Dennis Rodman for Scotty and Jordan. It was Chris Bosh when it was LeBron and D Wade. And for Giannis and Chris Middleton, it was Drew Holiday. And that is, there's a third glue guy who on his own team can average 25, but he's choosing to average 15 while supporting you two, right? And it's like Chris Bosh averaged 25 before getting there, but he's like, you know what? I'll take 17. Kevin Love averaged 25 before getting there, but you know what? I'll take 18. Dennis Rodman is like, hey, I won't score anything, but I'll get 50 rebounds, right? Like, there's this guy who it's usually the person that doesn't care about getting credit. And man, if I can say this in all of our organizations, whether it be business or teams, there is always one person carrying a heavy load, and we don't necessarily recognize them because they don't look for recognition.
Wow.
They
Come
just
on.
carry it and serve. And for me, I started looking for that in our church. I started looking for people who I'm like, you never missed a Sunday in 104 weeks. You served every week. You've been like, you've led teams, you've helped moms, you've helped like, and it's like they never look for recognition. So if you don't go look for them, you won't even recognize those people on your team. And those are that third guy. Any powerful team has a triangle. That third guy who says, I don't need the recognition, I don't need the accolades, but I know I brought my best every single night to help my two leads, man. And that's what Drew Holiday was, man. And so it's powerful to see in that championship DNA that you have to have that it's like the power of three is what I call it. You got to have the power of three working with you in to really take you to, yeah, we can be good, but if we want to be great and reach our fullest potential, a three-strand cord is not easily broken. The Bible puts it that way. You got to
Come
have that
on.
third strand.
That's so good, man. And I think about, it just like the season of life that God has you in, your ability to learn these leadership lessons
Yeah,
while working with the Bucks, but then also simultaneously be building one of the fastest growing churches. And I think that it really speaks to this concept. I know you and I have had conversations about this, but
Yeah.
we're really seeing a generation of leaders that are operating in what I call the portfolio lifestyle, meaning
Mm.
it's not necessarily just one lane. And like I think about you, you know, you're a barber that can cut hair. You can get on
Yeah.
a stage and speak to businesses. You can get in
Yeah.
the room with NBA athletes. You can, you know, serve your church, which is full of people that got money and don't have money, that are,
Come on.
you
Yeah.
know, that are on the mountaintop, that are in the valley. And it's just
Come
this
on.
interesting, it's an interesting skill set. And,
Yeah.
and people, even, you know, here we are, we're 35 minutes into this episode, and they're like, man, Ken's got energy. This man's got the best smile. He's
Come
got
on.
swagger. Look at the beard. Man, his life, man, he just must have it all together. And I said this when I started this off. People need to catch this. I believe it's your secret sauce. I'll
Hmm.
never forget this. We were invited to an event in Iowa City with Jordan Montgomery. Shout out to Jordan.
Yeah, JM.
And man, just a great crew of people. Thomas Williams, Ryan Leake, Brad Lomenick, the whole crew.
Come on.
Um, and I remember you were a little bit late to the dinner, and
Yeah.
you came down, and we were just talking about our challenges, right?
Yeah.
And you just jumped right in and just got vulnerable. Like you
Yeah.
sat down, and within 10 seconds, you had the whole, I mean, it was like a pin could drop in there because of your vulnerability. But it's
Yeah.
that vulnerability and that humility that make you so magnetic. I really believe this.
Yeah.
I believe that it's why these athletes that everybody wants a piece of, like they trust you because that
Yeah.
there's something in that that's trustworthy.
Yeah.
But I want to connect this to, I remember just, you know, sending you voice texts after we had met, just, you know, catching up. Hey, how are
Yeah.
you? I'm thinking about you. I'll never forget this moment. I was about 2 miles up the road from my house. I was out getting gas late one night.
Yeah.
You came to my heart. I sent you a voice text,
Come
and
on.
I'll never forget you hitting me back, and you know, talking about how you were walking through a divorce. And I just
Yeah.
remember, man, just number one, just thinking, man, well, praise God for Ken's vulnerability. And then simultaneously, obviously, you being a close brother, I felt for you.
Yeah.
My heart was heavy for you. And, you know, here we are. It's been 2 years since that moment. And
Yeah.
you haven't allowed the disappointment to take you out, to destroy you. You've actually walked through this season and gotten stronger and
Yes, sir.
stronger and stronger.
Yes, sir.
And so I would love for you to just speak to that difficult season, because I think it's easy for people to look at you and be like, oh, he must just have it all together. But you walk through a very painful season.
Yes, man. Absolutely. I mean, thanks for giving me a chance to speak on it. I do think that vulnerability is a strong character trait to have if you're going to be a strong leader. You know, people should be able to look at you and see the real story behind this is what you present on the stage. And so, yeah, when I got married really, really young, I told you I'm a PK. And so when you're a PK, you know, you want to get active. I'm like, man, I want to serve. I want to get married. I want to do everything my dad did. 19 years old, I'm getting married. I want to have my first kid at 23, second kid at 20. You know what I mean? I mean, I was
Yeah.
just, and I did it.
Moving and
Um,
grooving.
Oh, I was ready. And I was 19 and she was 18. My kid's mom was 18. And so we were both young. And as we got married, as we continued to grow together, it was beautiful, but it obviously had its challenges. We had to grow together, mature together, difficult moments. And then we started to see as time we were growing apart, right? And it was starting to like separate. Man, I was fighting so hard to hold on to it. And to be honest, I was fighting desperately. Number one, because I love marriage. I
Yes.
absolutely love the mother of my kids, and I just was hoping that there was just a way that we can get through. You know, it's just regardless. Like, if you love marriage, you're just like I just don't receive the enemy. I
Mm-hmm.
don't receive that. Like I'm
Yes.
fighting, and then it hit a crossroads where we did. And I won't go into any of the details, but what I will say is the details of what it took for me to get through that. I had to really be intentional with that journey and what it looked like because I had realized that I had never been single in my adult life. That
Wow.
I had a girlfriend at 18, married at 19. Like I did not realize that like, wow, you have to be alone. And then I started wrestling with all of these other thoughts of like, whoa, you've never been alone. Like, wow, why does this feel like this? It feels weird to come home when you used to walking into your house and your daughter runs and grabs you and your son wrestles with you for 10 minutes before you tell him, all right, where's your homework? Time to go to bed. And then you
Hmm.
walk in home and it's silent. It's
Wow.
like there's nothing. And you don't realize that silence is scary. And so, man, OC, I put myself through therapy. And this is the first time I ever went to therapy. I was against it. I'm a strong guy. I read books. I'm an intellect. I'm like, I don't need therapy. You know, therapy is for wusses. You know, I'm good. I'm okay. And I make jokes about it. But brother, it was the best thing I could have ever done in my life. I mean, I had two therapists that I was assigned to, and one of them was just to make sure that I was properly walking through forgiveness and healing and honoring God. And then
Mm.
the other one was my performance therapist. His job was to make sure that when I was preaching, that none of my pain bled through the message, that I stayed true to God's word. Um,
Wow.
and man, it helped me so much because it gave me proper perspective. It allowed me to walk in forgiveness and to still be able to love my kid's mom through the process. And yeah, it's difficult and it's ugly for everybody. Nobody wants to walk through that separation, but it really allowed me to protect my heart and to walk in the true spirit of love and in unity. And what it did for me was I said, I told my church we have this mantra called true, transparent, real, and unedited. We live by this. And then now I'm going through a divorce, and I told my church, I said, I've always been transparent, real, and unedited with you. And I said, it would be a sin for me to stop today. So I said, I want to be honest
Wow.
with you where I am. And through the journey I want to share, I'll tell you guys where I'm at. If I'm hurting, if I'm going through a process of healing, if I got to step away, I'll let you know everything. And honestly, I was expecting it to maybe backfire in some ways, and maybe people would say, "Oh, step away," But it actually worked out in my favor. I mean, our church grew 4x, and people just gathered around me and said, "You know what? Thank you for not being a leader who hides. Thank you for being true. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for allowing us to see you not just on your best days, but on your days where you were hurting and days where you were broken." And I did not know in my generation there was a desperate need for leaders who could relate and not just motivate. They needed
Wow.
leaders who could say, like, I am you. I know that I'm speaking. I know that God is using me as a messenger. I know that my calling is what you see prevalent right now. But please don't ever think that walking out of this building, that you walk into a car and I walk into a spaceship. like we walk into that same car. We deal with the same life, the same difficulty. And this is how I'm handling it. Not just how I'm telling you you should handle, it's how I'm
Yeah.
actively handling it right now. I'm actively walking through this. And so I started to preach with a different level of conviction because it's like, now I'm not just saying we need to forgive. Now I'm saying, hey, I know forgiveness is hard. And I know some days you question if a person is worthy of forgiveness. I know sometimes even after you forgive, you still feel something like, God, why can't I stop feeling this? Right. I was able to teach from a place of experience and not just principle. And it just changed my ability
Yes.
to communicate.
Wow, man. Well, yeah, just watching you continue to march forward. I mean, I told you this before we got on here. It's not the end of your story. It's just a chapter
Oh,
in it.
come
And
on. Come on.
you've done it with honor. You've walked through the difficulty with honor,
Yeah.
and just respect the way that you have led through a very challenging season. And
Thank
it's
you.
still challenging, right?
Absolutely.
I'm sure that again, it'll always be part of your story. But hopefully, somebody that's listening to this episode today that finds himself in a painful season, I hope that gives you some hope to keep going, that there
Yes, please.
is there is more ahead. And I love your perspective that there's a different place that you lead from today, having some experiential knowledge
Yes.
versus just understanding principle. And so,
Yeah.
man, I just hats off to the way that you've stewarded such a difficult moment, and have
And can I just
have
say this,
continued.
OC? Like, I'm because you just alluded to this, and I want to just say, just quick 30 seconds. I really do want to encourage anybody who may be going through a difficult separation or divorce because it can really feel like the end of the world for some people. I know it did for me. You felt like you have to grieve. It's like they say it's like a death, but it's worse than a death because at least with death, it's done. Like you never will see
Mhm.
that person again. When with divorce, you're grieving somebody you have to continue to deal with. So it's like I grieved you yesterday, I let it go, but then I have to do something else again, and like it's over and over.
Wow.
And it can feel like the end, but I just want to encourage them that it's not. Like divorce, yes, it's like it's the closing of one chapter, but it's the beginning of another, and that you can't walk into any new season without leaving the old season. You can't see anything beautiful in your future without leaving the ugly from your past, right? And so I don't see it as a negative thing of like, oh man, I'm like, God, thank you for all things that I've been through. Thank you for the lessons I've learned. And now my friend Ryan told, he gave me the quote I've been using ever since is the luxury of being able to start again. Not everybody has the luxury of being able to start again. When you have a difficult season, some people feel like that's the it for me. But I always know that God has given us the blessing of faith, favor, and the luxury of being able to start again.
Come on, man. It makes me think that his mercies are new every day. And I see you walking in that, man. And
Man,
it's a testament to your faith. It's a testament to your conviction to what God has called you to.
thank
And
you.
it's really a beautiful thing. What do you think? I mean, you've kind of alluded to this a couple times. While I have you, I want to ask you this.
Yeah,
We've got leaders of organizations, people that want to
yeah,
see their thing grow.
yeah,
You had to lead through, not only COVID, building a
yeah.
church in the midst of COVID, but then this difficult personal season. Yet here you are leading this thing that just keeps growing. What have been some of the keys, though, as a leader to leading an organization that is continuing to grow in a healthy
Yeah,
manner?
absolutely. Well, I love when I speak to business leaders because you're a pastor, also OC, so people don't understand. Like as a pastor, CEOs don't understand that we're really the same. We get I
Mhm.
get 1,500 volunteers to show up on a weekend and to work for me for free after they gave you 40 hours this week, right? And so like, what is it? What is it about the leadership style that says, when they're going to work, I'm showing up to work because I'm getting paid. When I'm coming here, I'm showing up because I'm convicted to do it. There's a passion that I have, and so for me, leading with that term, compassion really does. Uh, it really does change the way that you handle people. So I've learned this, and it. It's like I don't want to say it's cliche, but we just heard it a lot that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right?
Wow.
All
Yeah.
right. So once people know how much you care, they really are willing to give you effort they wouldn't have given to anybody else. I
Wow.
can't tell you how many people just showed up more, worked harder, gave an extra hour simply because they said, you know what, I know Ken cares. I know he cares about
Wow.
me. I know he cares about my family. I know he cares about my kids. And so they show up more just by remembering small details. Hey, how's John? Hey, how's your wife? How's Annie? Oh, you remember my wife's? Yeah, you told me about it last time, right? Like it's like they just show up more, and as you're just more invested in really loving people, you start to realize that you don't have to pull teeth. People want to serve in a place where they're loved and they're known. It's the what's the old song? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, right? You just want to be a part of something where you're known and you're honored and you're respected. And when you can create that kind of environment for people, man, they'll give you their last because they want to be a part of something that is a movement, even with.
Isn't it? It's so true. We as humans want to be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. We really do.
Absolutely.
And it is,
Absolutely.
I think of one of my favorite definitions of leadership in this particular season that makes me
Yep.
think about what you just said is from Pastor Jabin Chavez out in at City Light in Las Vegas. He says
Yeah.
this. He says leadership is number one. It's the conviction to know that what you're doing is important,
Come on.
and number two, it's the skill to invite other people into that important work. And
That's so good.
I
That's
love
so
the
good.
two-part definition because it
Yeah,
starts
that's
with
so
a
good.
conviction that what we're doing matters, that what we're
Yeah,
doing
man.
is making a difference, that
Come
what we're
on.
doing is changing the world. And
Come
when you
on.
believe that, when you have that kind of conviction, you're
Come
not
on.
apologizing for inviting people into purpose, inviting
Come
people into
on.
impact. And
Come
so I
on.
just
That's so
see
good.
I see you doing that so well, man.
Yeah.
And I just want to commend you to keep going. I do want to kind of finish here. This deep passion of mine. Again, I've kind of said this a couple times. I don't want to see fast fruit. I want to see lasting fruit. I want to see leaders walk out long obedience in the same direction. I want to see a generation of leaders finish stronger than they started.
Come on, man.
And again, in this world, oftentimes we can promote our highlight reels. People kind of see, they see the stage, they see the
Yeah.
sermons, they see the talks, they see all that stuff, and it's
Yeah.
all good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want to talk about the backstage for a minute. Like, what are
Yeah.
some things that you're doing to stay humble, to build your
Yeah.
character, to sharpen the saw in the crafts that you have? Like, talk a little bit to the people about how serious you take what people don't see.
Oh man, absolutely. Well, number one, it's moments like this where we have an opportunity and an invitation to sit with a brother who I respect, who I've seen his work, I've seen his leadership, I've seen his ability. And you say that this conversation is also going to be feeding me. I take these kinds of conversations very carefully because I'm always able to grow. I want to be a forever student. And I mean that. I want to be 70 years old and still reading and still journaling and still writing and still growing in whatever way that I can. And so I've been blessed to have mentors and a pastor and friends who all speak into me.
Come
And
on.
it's funny because when I'm in those modes, I am not pastor, I am not leader, I am not speaker, I am student. I literally do not speak. I get around my mentors and you would question if I had any business at all. You're like, man, this guy's been quiet the whole time. It's because when I'm around people I respect and who's accomplished so much more than me, this is not the time to share what I know. It's the time to be quiet and just to learn and to soak up from great, amazing men and women. And so I stay in environments where I feel challenged. I stay around people who challenge me to grow. I stay around other sharp leaders because iron really does sharpen iron. So I stay around other sharp leaders. I spend as much time as I can. And you just said, hey, I might have this. I'm like, yo, let me know. Because if I can come out and just sit, right, just to learn, just to grow, because more is caught than taught. So just being
Come
around,
on.
just soaking up the energy and the spirit and the atmosphere, you start to realize like, man, I was made better. Even though I may say I don't have like this phenomenal quote that I left with, or I don't have this jaw-dropping book idea when I left with. It wasn't anything that was crazy and paramount. It was the small, consistent nudge to get better. It was the
So good,
small,
man.
consistent nudge to be better every day, right? It's like, I want to get better. I want to get bigger. I want to get brighter. And not in the sense of what people can see, but inside of here, I want to be bigger because I'm taking the time to grow and to develop who it is that I am. And so the back of stage stuff to me is the real, that is where the real work comes. By the time people see you on the stage, they're seeing a compilation of years of learning and sacrifice, but it's compiled right into a very short clip. They don't see the years of being a student.
So good, man. I oftentimes say this: stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And what
Come on.
what you're describing is somebody who's committed to living a prepared life. So it's
Come
Ken
on.
Lock, folks. I want you to know this. Ken Lock, he's not preparing for the moment. He lives a life of preparation, and moments show up, and
Come on.
it reveals his preparation. So
Come on.
I
So
want you to
good.
catch that. One of my favorite quotes is what you learn after you know it all that counts.
Ooh, so good.
I think what you're saying is so true, man, that leaders are learners and learners are leaders. And
Yes.
would we posture ourselves in that place of humility to never let our ego think that we've arrived. And I love that about you, man.
Come
I
on.
see that in you. You're making a difference in
Yeah.
this world. And any
Yeah.
parting words before I share how people can follow you and go on the journey? Anything you just want to
Yeah.
share to encourage the people as we
Yeah. I
close?
mean, one of the things that one of my mentors told me a long time ago, the acronym for ego, because you just mentioned ego, is edging God out. And anytime
Wow.
you're in your ego, you limit your ability to allow God to help you and to allow growth to happen in some magnificent ways. And so I always think about that. The moment pride and the ego comes up and I feel it, I shut it down intentionally because the ego doesn't know when to be quiet, right? It just keeps going on its own. So you got to learn to shut that thing down, right? And I've learned to do that. It's one of the reasons why I've been able to reach the small level of success that I have. And I pray that I'm able to reach so much more by staying around the OCs and the Ryans and the Jordans and the Gore and John Gore. I mean, everybody, John Maxwell. I want to be around as many as I can and constantly learn, grow, and be a better student tomorrow.
Come on, man. Well, we're so grateful for you. I just want you to know we champion you. We believe in
Thank you,
you.
brother.
We know you're just getting started,
Yes,
and
sir.
we're so super excited for all that's to come. All that God's gonna
Yeah.
continue to do in you and through you. Hey,
Come on.
how can people get in touch with you? Here's what I know. Hey, if you got an event coming up and you need somebody to come in that room and bring the house down, Ken Lock is your guy. And
Come
I know,
on.
hey, I love following you on social media. I think it's so
Yeah.
cool to see how engaged the community is in like
Yeah.
what you're doing, man. It's like, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Like I get
It
on
is.
Sundays, I like go to your profile and I'm like, dang, they just got a culture in their church. Everybody's shouting out what they're learning and getting. But
Yeah.
Where can we go to follow your journey? What are some of the best ways to stay in touch?
Man, absolutely, man. So there's a couple of things. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok, because my next gen made me get a TikTok, right?
Come on.
So on all of those, I'm my name is Kenneth Lock II. It's Kenneth Lock II, because my dad is senior. Also, we at evolvenation.org is our church. And then KennethLockSpeaks.com is also where if you want to connect with me or book for anything.
Come on, man. Hey, thanks for this conversation, bro. I know people got better today. You dropped wisdom, and it's been so fun hanging with you, man. Thank you for being generous. Appreciate you, bro.
Thanks for having me, bro. I appreciate you, OC.
God bless you, bro.